Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. He's a graphic designer, author, and educator based in Brooklyn. He has a deep and wide-ranging expertise in visual communications, from custom typography and conceptual illustration to brand visualization and the design of editorial and information systems, which is the result of over 30 years of professional and academic activity. Please join me in welcoming Timothy Samara. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Are you
Thanks
ready?
for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Are you ready for 20 questions?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, here we go. Question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
I guess in the simplest terms, I'm a graphic designer. Educated that way and have participated in professional practice for, as you said, about 35 years. For the past 20 years, I've been very focused on teaching. I started teaching in around 2001 at a variety of institutions, mostly around the New York area, School of Visual Arts, FIT, NYU, University of the Arts, now defunct, which was also my alma mater.
Great. Just a note for the audience, if you guys are interested in other Brooklyn episodes, check out the episode with Timothy Goodman. Question two. What's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I think it would be kind of the depth of my curiosity about things. But I don't know that the word curiosity really captures it accurately. I'm like intensely fascinated by things, and I always have been, even from the time that I was an early child. I always wanted to know not about things, but not just, what things were, whether it was about like spiders or the brain or ducks or whatever it happened to be, but like why things are the way they are and how they got to be that way, and the interrelationships between things. And that has served me really well, both professionally and academically, in terms of working with clients, being able to kind of interrogate their goals and their needs and the kind of the means of communication on their behalf without kind of preconceptions. And then in teaching, really being able to help guide students in a similar way to approach ideas without preconception, without looking to convention, not really taking anything at face value, but being able to kind of pick things apart and to find new ways. So it's given me a kind of an intuitive knack for being able to kind of cut through clutter, through filters, through complication, and to kind of try to get to the essence of things. And that essence, I mean, of greatest fascination to me throughout that whole time has been really kind of visual, art making, design making, how that kind of transaction happens. And it affects me very deeply. So in a weird way, it also dovetails with another thing which is kind of weird about me, I guess. I have a photographic memory, and I process most information in a kind of visual way, in recall of even things that I've read. I'm not really kind of hearing the words, I'm seeing the page and the text that was written. So it's probably very helpful. So there's this kind of catalog of images going back through my memory through decades.
Great. And that segues nicely into number three, which is why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Um, it being interested in so many things and this kind of, kind of thinking about things in kind of systematic ways, and how that informs, this activity, this image making or visual communication, which is so fundamentally human, is that trying to understand that and to deal with it in a way that is helpful and beneficial for others um, is really, really kind of inspiring to me. It's the thing really that really gets me up in the morning every day is, thinking about, what does it mean for one group or one entity to express ideas or to communicate to others in a way that's, so intrinsically human. And very often, of course, that kind of happens in the context of very kind of commercial practice. Yeah, working on behalf of a client, but it is for me so much larger a kind of endeavor.
Great. And some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
I don't know.
Mm.
I don't really concentrate that much on the future or on the past for that matter. I'm kind of like a cat. I'm very, very present. Um, whatever is going to be is going to be. Things always change, and one can plan to a certain degree and try to orchestrate a path forward, but eventually conditions arise in the way that they're going to. So I don't spend a lot of time or energy kind of worrying about what the future is going to be. So I'm always kind of open and optimistic and kind of flexible for what might come.
Great. And five, we say, is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
I don't think that it really does. In terms of physical place,
Mm.
for me, I mean, as a lot of people are probably very similar, is that given the internet and um, that kind of interconnectivity, where I do my work is not necessarily important. It can happen, pretty much anywhere. I'm comfortable in any kind of an environment. I'm very, very adaptive. So whatever I encounter in a given place, whether it's another city or it's out in the country or it's, here in Brooklyn, um, new kinds of environments don't really affect whatever's going on in my head. It's really more the kind of the conditions that are in that place. So I would say that if anything, it's kind of more important than place is the kind of the space or the context.
Mm.
And for me, that's more of and I think for a lot of people, maybe more of something that happens or is important in one's formative years.
Mm.
I mean, I'm very conscious of the kind of the space that I existed in or that I was brought up in, which was in a family of artists. And so that has a lot to do with, kind of my general outlook. And so I think that, the conditions around oneself, wherever one happens to be physically, are really the kind of the driving factor in how one approaches whatever one does.
Great. And if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Um, Maybe to be a little bit less rigid in my thinking, or maybe not to try to sort of commandeer the future or to plan so rigidly. Um, and it's something that I've sort of come to understand, at least for myself, in growing older. Um, as I just mentioned, this kind of like openness to whatever happens to be and to be able to adapt in some way. Um, when I first got out of school, I was really, really intent on kind of entering design practice in a very, very commercial way, joining the workforce, working my way up the corporate ladder and so on. And it really chasing kind of the dollar. Um, and a lot of people, I think, especially younger designers, are of course, uh, you know, concerned about making a living. But I think that the thing to do is, to go with your gut, to follow your instincts towards what is most fulfilling and where you think that you can be the most valuable in exercising your particular skills, your particular sensibilities, and the money will come. It's a kind of a cliche, do what you love, and everything will be okay. But I really kind of firmly believe that.
Great. So 7 is what's a day in your life like?
It's kind of boring. I get up in the morning, I eat breakfast, and then I generally start working on whatever it is that I happen to be working on. I mean, right now it's a little bit more relaxed because it's the summer and I'm between semesters. So once the school year starts, it's a much more kind of programmed kind of experience where I've got classes that I have to get to and meetings to deal with and advising and so on. But it's a very, very kind of open-ended sort of a day. I'll work on projects that I happen to be involved with, but at the same time, I have this kind of opportunity uh, to take a break, to read something, to investigate something that's, kind of percolating in my head in some way without really the constraint of deadlines.
Grade 8 is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
I just consume information. I have a terrible book buying addiction, and typically design books. So that's first off. I'm constantly looking for new publications. I think I lost count around like 2000 or so volumes. Only half of which are available to me right now because the rest are in storage because I have no space. Um, but beyond that, I'm constantly reading articles, looking at other designers and studios' websites, reading blogs. There are a number of blogs that I visit on a regular basis, looking at YouTube videos of presentations and lectures and so on. So I'm sort of constantly just sort of feeding, kind of the catalog in my head.
Nice. And tools. What tools do you use? Do you use digital and analog tools?
Yes, both. I came out of basically a print background. I was really kind of on the cusp of the transition from analog or handcraft based design making, cut and paste, drawing, collage, and the appearance of desktop publishing in the early 80s. And so melding those two has always been something that's just been kind of there. I gravitated to the digital space, pretty early on. It appeared in the second or third year that I was in school. Um, and just because of the way that I was working and the demands of the projects that I was involved with, is that I had to become, pretty proficient, and it was really, really new and exciting at the time. So of course that fascinated me, as things tend to do. But I do really, really enjoy bringing the hand into things. I draw, so a lot of my work begins with hand sketches, even typography, um, and of course image making. Even if I'm, considering the possibility of photography as an option, for how a particular kind of image might be delivered, is that it begins kind of formulation in the form of a sketch. But I paint, I draw, I do printmaking. It's a kind of a mixed bag.
Great. So halfway, number 10, how do you deal with work life or life work balance?
I used to not. Uh, there was no work-life balance. Everything was work, work, work because I had this kind of compulsion that derives from that sort of obsessive and relentless fascination with the doing of things and the interrogating. So I used to just work constantly, and then I would like squeeze in a meal, and then if I had to sleep, I would. But things change as I'm older, and so I have a lot less energy than I used to. And other kind of obligations. I'm married, so I have to deal with another person whose needs I need to to be conscious of. So it comes down to really kind of disciplined scheduling. I end my day at a really specific time, and I compartmentalize so that the work that I'm doing takes place in a particular location, which is my studio. And then when I leave that place and I go to the place where I live, which is my apartment, is that only living happens there. Um, and that's really the only way that I can do it, because otherwise, I have to keep that separation. Otherwise, things kind of bleed into each other, and I get a little bit lost.
Great. And if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
I would either be a doctor or a lawyer. Um, and both of those fields were of great interest to me when I was young, especially medicine, and particularly kind of surgery. I was really interested in biology and human anatomy and bodily processes. And for a good period of time, I considered going to medical school. But it was the visual fascination kind of won out. It's just the both of those fields, as well as visual communication, to me share that kind of interrogative spirit, the desire to understand things in depth, to be able to manipulate in various ways, to be creative. Um, so there's a lot of kind of interesting flexibility around those kinds of systems that are really interesting to me.
Great. And what would you not like to do with your career?
Anything that involves heavy manual labor.
Mm.
I'm not a physically strong person, and become exhausted easily. Plus, I'm also easily bored. So repetitive kind of rote and kind of work just is kind of soul crushing to me. But just I applaud people who are physical and are able to enjoy that kind of work. And obviously it's valuable. All work has value. But it's just not something I could even contemplate.
Great. And how about a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Favorite.
Mhm.
My favorite word is the F word.
Mm.
It's supremely expressive, very flexible, and comes in handy a lot. Um, and there's something about the transgressive quality of it that I find very appealing. Um, in terms of a quote, I guess it is what it is would be up there. One is never in control of what's going on around oneself. At least I'm not, or I don't think I am. It very often comes down to responding in some useful or valuable way to conditions that arise, and drawing upon one's own sensibilities, one's experiences, in order to confront and deal with whatever that situation is. But I think a lot of people get hung up on and really anxious about, well, what if this happens and what if that happens, and try to plan and control things. And I find it's easier just to kind of let things flow.
And how about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Iconic. The word iconic, only because it's so overused and usually incorrectly, which bothers me to no end. Words have meaning. Um, but it might just be that it's very popular right now, and so it's just been annoying me. I don't hear there's no I don't think there's any kind of phrase or quotation that I don't like.
And you're choosing one word to describe yourself, what word would it be?
Intense. Um, Yeah, I think that would do it. I am, like I said, kind of relentlessly involved in things. When I settle on something or focus on something that is of interest to me, um, a problem that needs to be solved, it's kind of nonstop. And I take kind of what I do, as a designer, even though it has this, kind of commercial kind of underpinning to it. I take what I do very, very seriously. Like for me, it's not just a job. It's just not just about clients. It's not just about making money and feeding the economy in particular ways, but it is I see it as a much larger kind of an endeavor, something that is really kind of fundamental and essential. It's an empathetic transaction. Um, and so I uh, I think that it's really, I'm not really sure where to go with that. Uh, beyond what I've just said.
No,
We
that's
can
great. Yeah. So 16, what keeps you up at night?
um in a nutshell, the human condition. There are things that I find remarkable about humanity, but um, the downsides. Humanity is not one of my favorite species, and hasn't been for some time. Our propensity for violence and to inflict injustice, to be willfully ignorant, um, to get lost in a kind of a fog of our own ideologies and wants and needs, and the ego is, I find, um, really kind of demoralizing. So that's basically it. I don't, nothing that's kind of circumstantial or day to day, makes it difficult for me to fall asleep. But I'm very, very often thinking about like, oh my God, what what are we doing? But I always try to remain optimistic.
Great. Okay. And final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
I don't really have one. I guess happiness, if that's even possible.
Mm,
Or some kind of fulfillment. I would like to be valuable in some way, to others. And I hope I am. I mean, I try to be with in regard to teaching. I hope
mm.
I'm delivering some kind of value from my experience and my expertise and passing it on to others, helping others to understand the kind of activity in which they're interested in, that they've committed to, and to achieve uh, um, some facility or confidence in that regard, and to be powerful with it. So if I'm effective in that way, that's, I guess, a dream. I'm not really interested in wealth or power, or I mean, I wouldn't mind, you sitting on a terrace on a Lago Maggiore sipping cocktails in the twilight years. But we'll see if we get there.
What inspires you?
Everything. Wonder, the curiosity of others, and the complexity of the world is really, really, just because it's so interesting. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. And last couple here. Any advice you'd like to share?
I mean, if I were, speaking to younger designers in particular,
Mm.
I think this goes back a little bit to the one of the previous questions, advice for my younger self. Know your stuff, and uh, be competent and be curious, and but follow your instincts to where they lead you towards some kind of fulfillment.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? And what's our call to action?
Keeping tabs on me is um, really just a matter of visiting my website, if anything. I don't have social media
Mm.
yet. But I guess a call to action, if would be to do what you can in the best way possible.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining today. Fleshing out the New York angle is something that's been really important for the show, early on with Timothy Goodman and Debbie Millman, and then eventually Gail Anderson. And keeping going with that has been really key. So thank you so much for helping with this.
Oh, my pleasure.